They paved over my driveway without asking. What I did next made the evening news. My name is Martha Ann Delaney. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived on this Texas ranch for 42 years. When I left to help my sister recover from hip surgery, the gravel road that led to my house was just fine. It had been there since 1976, laid by hand by my late husband Robert, one wheelbarrow at a time. The crunch of those stones meant you were home. When I came back 4 days later, it was gone. In its place, a smooth strip of black asphalt reeking of fresh tar, bordered by landscaped sod and ornamental stones. Solar lights lined both sides like some suburban development entrance. My driveway had been turned into a boulevard. No phone call, no permission, just a smug little letter tucked into my screen door. We are pleased to inform you that the road improvement has been completed for community beautification. Community? I'm not part of their community. That fancy HOA neighborhood, Meadowbrook Springs, with its pastel houses and strict rules. They're the newcomers, built 5 years ago on what used to be good cattle land. My side is real country. Dust, oak trees, chickens, and memories that go back decades. They've been using my driveway as a shortcut to town. I'd never stop them. Neighborly courtesy. But now they'd paved it without permission, spent $47,000 of HOA money, and had the nerve to call it an improvement? The HOA president even came to my kitchen in her pearls and silk blouse to tell me I shouldn't stand in the way of progress. I was furious. But fury, I've learned in 68 years, is best served with patience and a clear head. Because what they didn't know was this. I might be a widowed school teacher who raises chickens and teaches neighborhood kids to sew. I might be quiet, polite, and keep to myself. But I am not someone you push around. And I was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget.
Chapter 1. The Road That Disappeared. You know, there are moments in life that divide your story clean in two. Before and after. The day I met Robert at that county fair in 1978, the morning the doctor called with his diagnosis, the afternoon I buried him under the old oak tree that shades my back porch. But I never thought a simple trip to my sister's house would give me another one of those moments. It was a Tuesday in late September when I turned my old pickup onto what should have been the familiar crunchy gravel leading home. I'd been gone 4 days, longer than I left the ranch in years. But Diane had just had her hip replacement, and someone needed to make sure she wasn't overdoing it. That's what us Delaney women do. We show up, we help, we don't complain. The drive back from Austin had been peaceful. I'd left before dawn, watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of peach and lavender. I had a thermos of coffee, a paper bag of kolaches from that little bakery Diane loves, and I was looking forward to checking on my chickens. Hens get temperamental when you're away too long, even when the neighbor boy feeds them. But when I made that turn, the turn I'd made 10,000 times in 42 years of marriage and 6 years of widowhood, my foot hit the brakes so hard the truck lurched. The gravel was gone. In its place stretched a smooth ribbon of black asphalt, bordered by fresh sod and ornamental stones. Little solar lights lined both sides like a suburban subdivision entrance. There were even young shrubs planted in mulched beds every few feet. I sat there, engine idling, staring at what used to be my driveway. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from anger yet, that would come later. This was something else. Confusion, disbelief. The feeling you get when you walk into your own home and find the furniture rearranged by strangers. I pulled forward slowly, the tires silent on the new pavement. So different from the sound Robert and I had loved, that satisfying crunch that meant you were home, away from the noise of the world. He used to say our gravel road was a boundary line. When you hear that sound, Martha, he'd tell me, you're in our kingdom now. I parked in my usual spot by the barn and just sat there for a moment, looking back at the road. It was beautiful, I suppose, in that sterile homeowner magazine kind of way, but it wasn't mine. Not in spirit, anyway. That's when I saw it. A cream-colored envelope tucked into my screen door, fluttering us slightly in the breeze. My knees creaked as I climbed out of my truck. 68 years of living will do that to you, though I've never let it slow me down much. I still got my garden to tend, chickens to feed, and lessons to teach the neighborhood kids who come by for sewing circles on Saturday mornings. I pulled the envelope free and recognized the logo immediately. The Meadowbrook Springs HOA, that sprawling development that had sprouted up 5 years ago on what used to be the Morrison farm. They turned 300 acres of good pasture land into cookie-cutter houses with strict rules about mailbox colors and fence heights. My hands weren't shaking anymore. When I opened it, "Dear Mrs. Delaney, we are pleased to inform you that the Meadowbrook Springs Community Improvement Committee has completed the beautification of your access road. This enhancement was undertaken as part of our ongoing commitment to property value preservation and community aesthetics. The total cost of $47,000 has been allocated from our Community Improvement Fund. We trust you will appreciate this upgrade to your property entrance. No action is required on your part. Regards, Clara Whitby, HOA President." I read it 3 times. Then I walked back out to that smooth black road, that road that cut across my land that had been in Robert's family since 1947, and I stood right in the middle of it. My paper trembled, not from fear, not from age, from the sudden, clear understanding that someone had mistaken my patience for weakness, my quiet life for surrender, my politeness for permission. I looked down at that perfect asphalt, thinking about the gravel underneath it, the gravel Robert had laid by hand 1 wheelbarrow at a time the summer before we got married. The gravel our daughter had ridden her bicycle through. The gravel that had crunched under the hearse wheels the day they brought Robert home for the last time. They'd paved over my memories, my history, my life. I looked down at that perfect asphalt, thinking about the gravel underneath it. The gravel Robert had laid by hand 1 wheelbarrow at a time the summer before we got married. The gravel our daughter had ridden her bicycle through. The gravel that had crunched under the hearse wheels the day they brought Robert home for the last time. They paved over my memories, my history, my life. I whispered to that empty road, "You paved over my life." The wind picked up, rustling through the live oaks that lined the property, and I could almost hear Robert's voice, steady and certain like always. "Don't raise your voice, Martha. Raise your boundaries." I folded that letter very carefully and walked back into my house. I had work to do.
Chapter 2. A Widow Against the World. She arrived the next morning in a white Lexus SUV, so clean it looked like it had never seen an actual road. I was in my garden, pulling late-season tomatoes, when I heard the purr of her engine on my new asphalt. I didn't stand up right away, just kept working, feeling the warm soil under my fingernails, honest dirt from honest work. Through the bean trellises, I watched her step out in pale pink slacks and a cream silk blouse, pearls at her throat, sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. Clara Whitby. I'd seen her at the county planning meetings, always in the front row with her leather-bound notebook, talking about community standards and neighborhood harmony. "Mrs. Delaney." Her voice had that practiced cheerfulness of someone used to getting their way. "I hope you received our letter about the road improvement." I pulled one more tomato, a beautiful Cherokee purple, before I stood. My knees protested, but I didn't let it show. Robert used to say I had a spine like an iron fence post, graceful from a distance but unmovable when tested. "I received it," I said, brushing my hands on my apron. "Didn't recall asking for it, though." Her smile never wavered. "Oh, I completely understand the surprise. But once you see how it improves the overall aesthetic and, frankly, your property value, I'm sure you'll be thrilled." "Thrilled," I repeated, the word flat in my mouth. "Absolutely. You know, that old gravel was quite an eyesore from the main road. Several of our residents mentioned it at meetings. Now, with the upgrade, the whole corridor has a more cohesive, upscale appearance." She gestured broadly like she was presenting a prize on a game show. I walked past her toward the house. "Would you like some iced tea, Mrs. Whitby? This conversation might take a few minutes." "Oh, that's kind, but I really just came to ensure you understood the improvement was a gift to you. Community relations, you know?" I kept walking. She followed. Inside, I pulled out the metal lockbox from the bottom drawer of Robert's old desk, the one with our important papers: birth certificates, marriage license, his discharge papers from Vietnam, and underneath all of that, the deed. I spread it on the kitchen table, smoothing the yellowed paper with careful hands. "This is the deed to this property, Mrs. Whitby, recorded in 1947, updated in 1976 when Robert and I married, Section 7, Paragraph 3. That road you paved? It's a private easement across private land. Always has been." She barely glanced at it. "Well, surely that's just a technicality. The road provides access to your property and allows traffic flow from our community to the county road. It's essentially a shared resource." "It's my driveway." "Mrs. Delaney," she said, and now the cheerfulness had an edge to it, like steel wrapped in silk. "I understand this is your home, and I respect that. But we live in a community now. Things have changed since you and your husband moved here. Growth brings progress. Progress brings certain accommodations." "Accommodations." I folded my hands on top of the deed. "Is that what you call paving someone's property without permission?" "We improved it at considerable expense." "I didn't ask you to. And surely you won't stand in the way of progress over something so small. Think of your neighbors. Think of the community. We're all in this together now." She was still smiling, still standing in my kitchen like she owned it. And that's when something shifted inside me. Not anger, exactly. Anger is hot and quick and burns itself out. This was colder, clearer. It was the feeling I'd had when I was 30 years old, watching my principal tell me women shouldn't teach advanced math classes. The same feeling when the banker suggested Robert should co-sign my business loan for the ranch, even though it was my inheritance that bought it. The feeling of being underestimated one time too many. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. "You should go now, Mrs. Whitby." She blinked, surprised. "I'm just trying to help you understand." "I understand perfectly. You can see yourself out." As her Lexus purred back down my road, I stood at the window, the deed still on my table. My eyes had sharpened, my jaw had set, and somewhere deep in my chest, I felt Robert's words settle in like a promise. Raise your boundaries. Tomorrow, I decided, they'd learn exactly where those boundaries were.
Chapter 3. The Lock and the Gate. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from worry. I'd stopped worrying years ago about what people thought of me. No, this was something else. purpose, maybe. Or perhaps just the clarity that comes when you finally stop bending and decide to stand straight. At 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I pulled on Robert's old work jacket. It still smelled faintly of him, leather and tobacco and earth, and walked out to the barn with my flashlight. The gate was right where we'd left it 6 years ago, leaning against the back wall behind the tractor. 15 feet of steel and iron scroll work, painted forest green, with Delaney Ranch spelled out in wrought letters across the top. Robert had commissioned it from a welder in Weatherford back in 1995, spent a month's feed budget on it because he said some things were worth doing right. A man's gate tells you everything about him, he'd said when it was installed. This one says, "Welcome if you're invited. Stay out if you're not." We'd taken it down after he died. Too painful to drive past every day, that proud declaration of our ranch when it was just mine now. I'd meant to sell it, but I could never bring myself to make the call. Now I understood why. I ran my hand along the cold metal, feeling every weld, every curve. The hinges were still solid. The posts were still in the barn, wrapped in canvas. It would take work, but I'd done harder things. By 3 o'clock, I had the posts loaded in the truck bed. By 4, I dug the first hole with the post hole digger, the same one Robert had taught me to use 40 years ago. 3 feet deep, Martha, I could hear him saying, deep enough that nothing short of God himself could move it. The moon hung silver and heavy overhead, washing everything in pale light. I worked steadily, the rhythm familiar: dig, lift, pour concrete, set post, level, brace. My shoulders ached, my hands cramped. I didn't care. At 5:30, just as the eastern sky began to lighten from black to deep blue, I lifted the gate onto its hinges. It swung open with a soft creak, that old familiar sound, and then I closed it, right across the middle of their beautiful new asphalt. I secured it with the heavy chain and padlock, the same lock Robert had used. The key was on my key ring, next to my house key and the one for the tractor. Then I stepped back and looked at what I'd done. The gate stretched across the road like a declaration. Beyond it, the pavement continued toward the HOA development. On my side, it stopped at my boundary, at my choice. I drove 4 steel posts into the shoulders and strung barbed wire across the ditches, just in case anyone thought about going around. Legal and proper boundary markers. Everything by the book. By 6:15, I was on my front porch with a cup of coffee, wrapped in a quilt, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. At 6:45, I heard the first car, then another, then several more, their engines idling, confused voices carrying on the morning air. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching through the oak trees as a line of vehicles backed up along the county road, Meadowbrook Springs residents trying to take their usual shortcut to town. Their shortcut on my land. A Mercedes honked. Someone yelled. More cars arrived, adding to the confusion. I rocked gently in Robert's old chair, the one he'd sat in every evening to watch the sunset. The morning light caught the letters on the gate, making them glow. Delaney Ranch. I raised my coffee cup slightly, a small toast to the growing chaos beyond my property line. "Welcome to my property, folks," I whispered, my voice carrying only to the chickens beginning to stir in their coop. Every single inch of it. The gate stood firm, unmovable, just like me.
Chapter 4. The Threats Begin. By 8 o'clock, Clara was back. This time she wasn't alone. A man in a charcoal suit climbed out of her Lexus, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my truck. His shoes were so polished they reflected the morning sun. City shoes. the kind that had never walked through actual mud. I stayed on my porch, refilling my coffee. Let them come to me. Mrs. Delaney. Clara's voice had lost all its sweetness. This is Harrison Webb, the HOA's attorney. What you've done is illegal obstruction of a public thoroughfare. I took a slow sip of coffee. Morning to you too, Clara, Mr. Webb. The lawyer stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Delaney, I'm sure we can resolve this situation quickly. That gate is blocking access to a road that serves multiple properties. It's blocking access to my driveway, I corrected, on my land. A road that was improved at significant community expense, Clara cut in, her cheeks flushing pink beneath her makeup. A road that provides essential access to my property, which you paved without permission. Mr. Webb opened his briefcase with a crisp snap. Mrs. Delaney, what your deed shows is an easement that's been in public use for years. In Texas, consistent public usage can establish... Can I stop you right there? I set down my coffee cup. Because I've got Sheriff Dale coming by at 9, and I'd like him to hear this too. Unless you'd rather explain to him why you're trespassing on private property to threaten me about my own gate. The lawyer's expression flickered. Just for a moment. We're not threatening. Sounded like a threat to me. All that talk about what's illegal and what I can't do on my own land. I smiled, the same smile I used to give students who thought they could bluff their way through a math test. See, here's what's actually illegal, Mr. Webb. You taking my property without compensation. That's called eminent domain. And last I checked, an HOA isn't the government. Clara's face had gone from pink to red. You can't just trap all residents. I haven't trapped anyone. There's a county road right there. Goes all the way around to the main highway. Adds maybe 10 minutes to your drive. Course, you could have thought about that before you decided to use my land without asking. This is absurd. Clara's voice rose. We improved your property. You trespassed on my property. Big difference. The sound of tires on gravel, real gravel on the county road, made us all turn. Sheriff Dale's patrol car pulled up, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Dale Cooper had been sheriff for 12 years, and before that, he'd bought feed from Robert every spring. Good man, fair man. Morning, Martha. He tipped his hat to me, then nodded to the others. Mrs. Whitby, sir? Sheriff, thank God you're here. Clara rushed forward. This woman has illegally blocked a public access road. Dale held up one hand. Let's slow down a minute. Martha, you called me about a property dispute? Yes, sir. These folks paved my private driveway without permission, and now they're claiming it's a public road. I handed him my deed, the pages still warm from sitting on my kitchen table. Been privately owned since 1947, never been public. Dale studied the document, his jaw working slightly. He'd seen enough property disputes to know what he was looking at. This road here? He pointed at my gate. Yes, sir. Always been private? Always. Robert's father built it. We maintained it. Never once gave permission for public use. Dale looked at Clara, then at the lawyer. You got documentation showing this is public property? Mr. Webb's silence was answer enough. Because if you don't, Dale continued, his voice mild but firm, then what we've got here is trespassing, destruction of private property, and now attempted intimidation of a property owner. He handed the deed back to me. "Martha, you got every right to gate your own driveway." Clara's mouth opened and closed. "But our residents can use the county road, ma'am, just like everybody else." As they drove away, Dale lingered. "You know this'll get messy, Martha." "I know. You need anything, you call me." "I will. Thank you, Dale." He smiled just slightly. Robert would have been proud. That's a good gate. After he left, I stood there, listening, and I could hear it already. Car doors slamming in the distance, voices rising, phones ringing. The gossip was spreading. Good.
Chapter 5. The News Crew and the Truth. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook. Not reporters. Not yet. These were my people. Neighbors from town, former students, ladies from church. Everyone had heard something. "Martha, is it true you locked the HOA out? Did you really put up that old gate? Good for you, hun. Those people have had it coming." I let most calls go to voicemail. I was busy at my computer, the laptop my daughter had given me 3 Christmases ago, insisting I needed to get connected. I'd mostly used it for looking up chicken diseases and pie recipes. Today, it had a different purpose. I'd found young Tommy Morrison that morning, 16 years old, and proud owner of a fancy drone his parents had bought him for his birthday. I'd watched him flying it over the old Morrison property, what was now Meadowbrook Springs, practicing his aerial photography. "Tommy," I'd called out, "how would you like to earn $50? His footage was perfect. Crystal clear shots of my property line, the road cutting across it, the gate standing firm. You could even see the survey markers Robert had installed years ago, proving exactly where my land began and ended. And there, plain as day, was the HOA's paving crew working on my property without a single permission form." Tommy had been saving videos for weeks, documenting the construction. "I thought it was weird they were working on your driveway when you were gone, Mrs. Delaney," he'd said. "Didn't seem right." Smart boy. His grandmother would have been proud. Now I attached those video files to an email, added scans of my deed, the HOA's letter, photos of the gate. I'd looked up 3 local news stations and the Dallas Morning News. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for just a moment. Once I sent this, there was no going back. This would be public, messy. People would talk. Then I thought about Clara's face in my kitchen. Surely you won't stand in the way of progress. I hit send. The first response came in 40 minutes. KAXS News, Channel 5. A reporter named Sam Chen wanted to come out that afternoon if possible. By 3 o'clock, a news van was parked on the county road, and a young man with kind eyes and a microphone was standing in front of my gate. "Mrs. Delaney, can you tell us what happened here?" I told the truth. Simple, plain, and honest. How I'd come home to find my driveway paved. How the HOA had spent $47,000 of community money without my permission. How they threatened me when I exercised my legal property rights. Sam was thorough. He interviewed Sheriff Dale, who confirmed the property ownership. He tried to interview Clara, who slammed her door in his face. That footage made the evening news. He even spoke to some Meadowbrook Springs residents. And that's when things got interesting. Wait, they spent HOA funds on this? A young mother with a toddler on her hip looked genuinely shocked. "We just voted to delay the playground equipment because the budget was tight." $47,000? An elderly man shook his head. "Clara told us that money went to the community center repairs." "She did this without a vote?" Another woman's voice rose. "We're supposed to approve major expenditures."
The story aired at 6 and 10. By midnight, it was on social media. By morning, it had been picked up by state news. Widow's land paved without permission. HOA demands she accept it. The comments section became my unlikely army. This is theft, plain and simple. Good for her. Property rights matter. That HOA president should be arrested. My grandmother would have done the same thing. God bless this woman. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. Martha, it's Janet Kelso from Meadowbrook Springs. I just want you to know, we didn't know. Most of us had no idea Clara did this. There's an emergency HOA meeting tonight, and several of us are demanding her resignation. I appreciate that, Janet. What she did was wrong. Using our money, lying to us, trespassing on your land. Martha, we're sorry. After we hung up, I walked out to the gate. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and crimson. In the distance, I could see lights coming on in the subdivision windows. I touched the cold metal, thinking about Robert, about boundaries, about the difference between being polite and being a doormat. The wind whispered through the oaks, and for the first time in days, I smiled. They were turning on each other now. I just had to wait.
Chapter 6. The Cars That Vanished. 3 days after the news story broke, Clara came back, alone this time. No lawyer, no SUV. She drove a small sedan and parked on the county road, then walked up to my gate on foot. I was pruning roses, taking my time with each cut. Making her wait wasn't cruelty. It was simply teaching a lesson about patience. Mrs. Delaney? Her voice was different now, smaller. May I speak with you? I wiped my pruning shears on my apron and walked over. Didn't unlock the gate, though. Just stood on my side of it. She looked tired. Her pearls were gone and there were shadows under her eyes. The board has asked me to negotiate a solution. A solution, I repeated. We'd like to lease access to the road, monthly payments, fair market rate. She pulled out a folder. Our attorney drew up terms. How much? $500 a month for shared access rights. It's generous considering you stole my property and got caught. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, thank you. Mrs. Delaney, please. Our residents need this access. The detour adds 20 minutes. Should have thought about that before. We're trying to make this right. Then put my driveway back the way it was. Gravel, every stone, the way Robert laid it. I met her eyes. That would make it right. She looked down. The board won't approve that expense. Then we have nothing to discuss. I turned back to my roses. Behind me, I heard her walk away. That night, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Dale Cooper. I need to report that vehicles have been using my private driveway for extended periods. Overnight parking, actually. Is that something I can address? It's your property, Martha. You can restrict access however you see fit. The second call was to Tommy Morrison's uncle, who ran a welding business. I need 2 more gates. Remote control. Can you have them ready by tomorrow? For you, Mrs. Delaney? Absolutely. At midnight, we installed them by flashlight. 1 gate at each end of my property, at the county road entrance and where my land met the subdivision boundary, both operated by remote control from my kitchen, both with heavy steel construction and concrete posts set 4 feet deep. I also mounted security cameras, 4 of them, solar-powered, recording everything. By 2 in the morning, the work was done.
By 3, I was asleep in my own bed, more peaceful than I had been in weeks. At 7:30, my kitchen camera alerts started buzzing. I poured my coffee slowly, then opened the security feed on my laptop. 12 cars were trapped on my driveway. They'd driven in from the subdivision side before dawn, thinking they'd beat the traffic. Now both my gates were closed and they were stuck in the middle like fish in a barrel. I could see people getting out, checking the gates, pulling on them, making phone calls, growing increasingly agitated. At 8 o'clock, someone knocked on my door. Clara stood there, her face white. "You can't do this. You've trapped our residents." "On my property," I said calmly. "They're trespassing, but I'm willing to let them leave. Thank God. Once you and I have a conversation about fair compensation for the use of my road." Her jaw tightened. "The board won't." "Then I suppose those folks will be late for work." I glanced at my watch. "Traffic's going to be terrible this time of morning. This is kidnapping. This is property rights." I pulled out my phone, showing her the security footage. "Every one of those vehicles entered my property without permission. That's trespassing. I've documented everything. Timestamps, license plates. I can call Sheriff Dale right now if you'd like." Behind her, I could hear car horns starting to honk, voices raised in frustration. Clara's hands were shaking. "What do you want?" "I want respect," I said quietly. "I want acknowledgement that what you did was wrong, and I want fair compensation for the use of my land." "How much?" I told her. Her eyes widened. "That's insane." "That's what happens when you force someone into business they never wanted." I started to close the door. "You've got my number. Those cars can sit there all day if needed. I've got nowhere to be." "Wait." Her voice cracked. "Please, just give me an hour to call the board." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd stood in my kitchen and told me not to stand in the way of progress. "1 hour," I said. "Then I'm calling Dale to report 12 trespassers." I closed the door and went back to my coffee. Outside, the trapped cars waited. Chapter 7. The Deal They Couldn't Refuse. Clara called back in 43 minutes. "The board will meet your terms." I didn't respond right away, just sat there at my kitchen table, looking out at the 12 trapped cars, their drivers pacing and checking their phones. One woman was crying. A man in a suit was gesturing wildly, yelling at someone on the phone. "Mrs. Delaney, did you hear me?" "I heard you, but we're not done yet." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "What else?" $3,500 a month for perpetual access rights. Paid on the first, no exceptions. Miss a payment, the gates close until you're current. That's... She stopped herself. "Fine," agreed. "A formal, written acknowledgement that this road is and always has been private property, that you trespassed, that you used HOA funds without proper authorization." Her breath hitched. "The board won't..." "Then those cars stay put." I kept my voice level. "Clara, I'm not interested in destroying you, but I am interested in the truth being told, in writing, signed by you and every board member." A long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, and argument. "Okay," she finally said. "We'll draft the acknowledgement. One more thing." I stood and walked to the window, looking at my gate standing proud in the morning light. "A public apology." "We'll include that in the written..." "No, public. On the news, the same Channel 5 that covered the story. You standing in front of my gate, admitting what you did was wrong, apologizing to me,
and to your own residents for misusing their funds? Absolutely not. Then we're done here. I moved toward the gate remote. Wait! Her voice was sharp with panic. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. You humiliated me when you paved my memories. You dismissed me in my own kitchen. You used your position to bully someone you thought was too old and too alone to fight back. My hand tightened on the remote. So yes, Clara, you're going to stand in front of a camera and tell the truth, because that's what accountability looks like. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, quietly, when? Tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock news. I'll have Sam Chin here. You'll apologize on camera, or the next morning, those gates stay closed permanently. Her voice cracked. I'll do it. Good. Now about those cars on my property. Please, let them go. They're innocent in all this. I pressed the remote. In the distance, both gates swung open with a smooth mechanical hum. They're free to leave, I said. But Clara, from now on, anyone using this road without proper authorization gets reported to the sheriff. Make sure your residents understand that. The next evening, I wore my Sunday dress, the navy blue one with the pearl buttons that Robert had always loved. I braided my silver hair and pinned it up the way my mother had taught me 60 years ago. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who knew her worth. Sam Chin arrived at 5:30. Clara came at 5:45, looking like she hadn't slept. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the redness around her eyes. The cameras rolled. I'm here to apologize, she said, her voice steady despite everything. To Mrs. Martha Delaney and to the residents of Meadowbrook Springs, I authorized the paving of Mrs. Delaney's private driveway without her permission, using HOA funds without proper board approval. What I did was wrong. It was trespassing, and it was a violation of trust. She looked directly at me. Mrs. Delaney, I'm deeply sorry for disrespecting you and your property. You deserved better. I nodded just once, accepting but not absolving. Sam turned to me. Mrs. Delaney, what happens now? Now, I said, looking at my gate, Robert's gate standing proud behind me. We all remember that boundaries matter. Respect matters. And a person's home, no matter how old they are or how quiet they live, is sacred ground. That night, the story ran again. But this time, the headline was different. Property rights prevail. HOA president apologizes after illegal paving. I watched it from my porch, wrapped in Robert's jacket, sipping tea. The wind had shifted. I could feel it. This wasn't just my victory. It was a reminder to anyone who'd ever been underestimated. Sometimes the quietest voice carries the most weight. You just have to know when to use it.
Chapter 8. The Road Home. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, I drove my old pickup down the asphalt road for the first time since this whole thing began. The lease payment had arrived on schedule every month, $3,500 deposited directly into the ranch account. I'd used the first payment to replace the barn roof. The second went into a college fund for Tommy Morrison, who'd helped me when it mattered. The third I donated to the county library in Robert's name. Money had never been the point. As I drove, I noticed the new sign at the entrance, professional,
elegant, with brass lettering that caught the morning sun. Private access, property of M.A. Delaney, authorized users only. Below it, smaller, Meadowbrook Springs HOA, licensed access. I smiled. They'd installed it last week after I'd approved the design. It was important, I'd told them, that anyone using this road knew exactly whose land they were crossing. The HOA had changed. Clara had resigned 2 days after her televised apology. The new president, Janet Kelso, the same woman who'd called to apologize, had come to my door with homemade apple pie and an actual contract, drawn up properly this time. "We want to do this right," she'd said. "We want to be good neighbors." And they had been. When my water pump broke in November, 3 HOA residents showed up with tools and know-how. When I needed help moving hay bales, young families volunteered. The Saturday sewing circle had doubled in size. Meadowbrook Springs mothers bringing their daughters to learn something their own grandmothers might have taught them. Respect, I'd learned, works both ways. Once you establish where you stand, people know how to stand with you. I passed the Morrison property, the land that used to be farmland and was now rows of identical houses. It didn't make me sad anymore. Things change, land changes. What mattered was remembering what came before and honoring it. At the end of the road, near my house, I saw Tommy setting up his drone for another flight. "Morning, Mrs. Delaney." "Morning, Tommy. Getting some good footage?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm making a documentary about property rights for my civics class." He grinned. "That boy is going places." Inside, I made my coffee and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the land Robert and I had built our life on. The garden where I'd taught our daughter to plant tomatoes. The oak tree where we'd buried our old dog, Beauregard. The porch where Robert had proposed on a summer evening 47 years ago. This wasn't just land. It was memory. It was history. It was love made tangible. They'd tried to pave over all of that without asking, without caring, without understanding that some things can't be measured in property values or community aesthetics. But I'd reminded them, not with anger, not with cruelty, just with the simple, stubborn insistence that boundaries matter, that respect isn't optional, that a quiet woman of 68 years carries just as much right to dignity as anyone else. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter in Houston. "Saw your story shared again today, Mom. 250,000 views now. People are calling you a hero." I typed back, "Not a hero, just someone who knew when to stop bending." The morning sun streamed through the window, warming the kitchen, and I could almost feel Robert standing beside me. Could almost hear his voice, steady and sure. "Don't raise your voice, Martha. Raise your boundaries." I set down my coffee and walked outside, past the gate that bore our name, past the road that was finally, officially, undeniably mine. The wind moved through the live oaks, rustling the leaves like a whisper of approval. And I whispered back, to Robert, to myself, to anyone who'd ever been underestimated. They all know where my boundaries stand now, and they always will.